You're listening to Fusion Patrol, a listener-supported podcast. Each week, we take a single episode of a science fiction TV series, movie, or audio and overanalyze it to within an inch of its life. Welcome to the discussion.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Fusion Patrol. I'm Eugene.
And I'm Simon.
And tonight we are looking at Season 2, Episode 4 of Real Humans. Episode 4. Episode 4 synopsis. Broken up into groups again, as always, because, it's getting harder and harder to do, but you'll see. Let's start with Jonas. Silas has been working to try to recreate Aesher's code, but he has bad news for Jonas. He doesn't think he'll be able to recreate the code, and this makes Jonas very angry. So much so that he decides to pursue other avenues. Researching Aesher's death, he learns of his mother, Greta, unaware that Bea has already killed her. He goes to Greta's house, but Colette tells him that Greta is not at home to visitors. In the mirror, he notices Bea's arm and the mark of the children of David. He forces his way in and tries to talk to Bea, pleading with her. However, she comes up behind him and knocks him unconscious. Later, he awakens and searches the house, ultimately learning about Aesher transhumanology, one of Aesher's probate assets, and finds out who the current owner is. Jonas has a new quest. Bea. Having broken into Greta's safe and only found the original Hubot prototype, Bea has tortured and murdered Greta to learn that Aesher's clone was buried in his grave. Coincidentally, this is in the graveyard adjacent to Asa's church, where Gordon has gone to seek punishment from God for murdering Marilyn. He speaks with Asa, and she tries to convince him that God can forgive any sin. Apart from building towers too high, zoning law violations are unforgivable. Gordon stays in the church praying, and then Bea arrives. She imposes the "We are the children of David" mantra on him, and he is in her thrall. She, Gordon, and Colette dig up Aesher's grave. Asa returns and discovers what they're doing. Bea tries reasoning with her that Aesher cannot be in the grave because he burned up. But when that argument falls on deaf ears, Bea goes to kill her. Gordon intervenes. He had extracted a promise from Bea that she would not harm Asa, and he holds her to it. They open the coffin and find Aesher's clone, but his brain is gone.
Brain is gone.
Bea has a new quest. Kevin is running with his new Real Humans crowd, and while he's doing well in Ava's How to Win Over the Public with Our Message class, it doesn't stop him from going out with the other classmates for a bit of rambunctious fun at the expense of a bunch of hub lovers that evening. Roger has his doubts about the crowd Kevin is hanging out with. Leonard. The Leonard clone is proving more than an annoyance for Hans. He does not recognize him, therefore he will not obey his orders. Leonard also does not recognize Vera, and as Vera tries taking care of him as she was programmed, Leonard resists, and they argue. Hans eventually forcibly turns him off and dumps him in the garage. This doesn't sit well with Sophia, and later she expresses her displeasure with Inger, who has words with Hans, and reactivates Leonard. The rest of the plots are inextricably linked to Mimi, so let's try bringing a little sense to them. Mimi is getting a new contract at Inger's law firm. Inger has driven for a deal that treats Mimi with the same benefits as a human. With the negotiations over, they bump into Klaus, his son Douglas, and Douglas's fiancée, Flash. Flash and Mimi immediately recognize one another, but they don't blow each other's covers. And later, when Flash loses a contact lens, Mimi covers for her. Privately, Mimi tells Flash not to do this, but Flash counters that she was in love with Leo. How is that different? Things aren't all great for the happy couple, though, as Douglas must tell Flash that he has a serious heart defect, and one day, maybe even tomorrow, he will just drop dead. Flash doesn't care. Betty's brother is holding a Transhumanism Party, and Matilda and Tobe are going. Tobe asks Mimi to go along, and she accepts. Einar, Betty's brother, and host of the party, immediately spots that there is something different about Mimi. And he decides to show Tobey and Mimi his little project to try to recreate code that David Aesher was supposedly working on to create free Hubots. Tobey thinks the code looks familiar. Unfortunately, this little party is also the soiree that Kevin and the Real Human Youth Corps have decided to crash. When they arrive, it's obvious they mean trouble, but Einar doesn't call the police because all the Hubots at his party are modded. When Kevin realizes Einar won't call the cops, he violently destroys a Hubot with a baseball bat. Too late, though, one of the guests called the police, and they arrive, arresting Kevin as he flees the scene. The cops round up everyone attending the party and start scanning the Hubots to see if they're modded. When they come to Mimi, Tobey jumps the cops, giving Mimi time to escape. However, Tobey and Matilda are also arrested. This leads to an awkward reunion of Hans and Roger when they have to pick up their children in lockup, while Inger goes to the location of the party and finds Mimi. She also talks with Einar, who claims that he is, quote, on the side of the Hubots, and that someday Inger will have to pick sides too. Back at home, Inger talks to Matilda and learns that Matilda is jealous of all the attention Inger gives Mimi. Inger tries to comfort her by saying that Mimi will never be human, a comment that Mimi overhears. Tobey also visits Mimi to apologize. She asks him why he took her to the party. Was it to show her off? No, Tobey says, it's because I like you. Mimi kisses him, and then suddenly the Children of David mantra seizes her, and she sends a confused Tobey packing. Tobey frantically digs around his room until he finds the USB stick that has the code. He calls Einar and asks him if it was possible to identify Aesher's free Hubot code. The end. Okay, episode 4. What do you think?
Yep. I'm still on board with this. I think we've definitely got the momentum back, and there are some interesting developments in this episode. I'm enjoying the new comedy double act of Hans and Leonard, so that's pretty good. And I think that the way in which the Real Humans political party fronting for violent activism is quite interesting and has certain parallels. So yeah, lots in this one that I found interesting and entertaining.
Do you think that I don't know her name, but the girl who's sweet on Kevin, her father, who is the head of the party,
yes,
Kabi or something like that, I don't know, his name is. Do you think he is advocating the violent action behind the scenes, or is he just, he and Ava, I don't know that those two of them ever have even met, but, Ava is clearly advocating for doing this the right way to win minds and win hearts, and the kids are all like, yeah, lapping it all up. But then, of course, immediately they go off to bed. Is that with tacit agreement of Dad?
I think that. So the parallel that I think is being drawn here is between, and I'm sure we see this today, although it feels to me like some of the kind of more violent right wingers feel much freer, particularly in the US, to be more open. But I think what we saw in kind of 80s and 90s far right activism in the UK, which has kind of evolved, and Europe probably, I think, has evolved over the last couple of decades in various ways. The kind of the violence has prevented it from becoming a political movement with kind of I don't want to say mass support, but the kind of core support that you need to get from the wider public in order to actually get a foot in the door of establishment acceptance, for want of a better phrase. So using the political system to achieve your ends. And I think that the way in which you've seen this evolve, so in the UK, thinking back to the 80s and 90s, you had the British National Party, and even their evolution from the kind of days of John Tyndall, when it was much more kind of explicitly racist and violent, through the kind of Nick Griffin era, when he was, I think there was a point when he got onto Question Time, so a kind of major UK panel show. So there were all these kind of questions about platforming these politicians. They were cloaking themselves in respectability by disavowing those kind of violent fringes. I think you see the same thing in France, where the kind of respectable face of the Front National, or whatever it's called now, because Marine Le Pen has kind of distanced herself from the more violent days of her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen.
Mm.
And I think that you're seeing it now in the UK through the way that operators like Nigel Farage are very careful. Even in some cases, he's been careful in how upfront he is about his associations with Trump, because that is not electorally popular in the UK. But certainly with, there are far right movements, like there's a football hooligan named Stephen Yaxley Lennon, who assembled a rally of, I don't know, 100, 150,000 people in London the other weekend.
Mm.
Really kind of nasty far right stuff. Goes by the name of Tommy Robinson. He gets people like Elon Musk to support him. And people like Farage distance themselves from him because they know that while these people can rally the kind of hardcore right wing, and this rally, there was violence, police officers were hospitalized, it's a turnoff for the public. So the girl's dad is trying to get elected. He does not want to be connected to the violence. Whether or not he secretly condones it, I'm not even sure matters, because I'm increasingly feeling that the agendas of these people are so inherently violent. They so much rely on divisions. And I think the girl herself in the show is intended to exemplify this. I think that what we're going to see is that, because of the way in which she is portrayed as a political organizer, because she's incredibly capable and savvy, like more than a typical student, she's getting them into groups, they're brainstorming, they're getting all their ideas down on flipboard charts and post-its, that, it's all very much like happy clappy idea generation, safe environment stuff. And then once they're sure of Kevin, they are willing to let him into the kind of the secret agenda that underpins all of this, which is, basically just hatred and violence.
You would think. And for somebody who is politically astute, as you're attributing to her, that she would understand that her participation in this could lead to ruin for her father in his efforts. Right? Of all the people, she shouldn't be out on this.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe organize it, maybe send some friends out on it, but, she can't risk getting caught, because that will be, maybe the people will forgive her. Oh, it's his daughter, but she is supportive of his movement, and she would have to understand that that could be a negative for him. But so, of course, then I just project on people like that what I always project on people like that, which is an unfortunate thing, but it's true. They're just stupid. And, they're driven by, I just want to bust up stuff. And then they'll work their way around it to try to justify it. And that is, unfortunately, a dangerous thing to do, because you can underestimate when there's a smart one of the nasty ones or two.
But I think
But yeah.
I think at the heart, it's almost indivisible, and that there is a way in which these people operate, where characters like Farage, for example, provide a form of political cover for characters like actually Leonard, because they are using their kind of political platform to frame the public debate in a way in which provides oxygen to the thugs and the kind of violent core. And it doesn't matter how smart or intelligent they are about tactics. It's the underlying motivation that matters, and the motivation is a violent one.
Yeah, and that's what I was just going to say. It seems to me like you cannot have a position, no matter how you want to frame it, that basically wants to get rid of a certain group of people. You can't say, I'm fine with immigration, it's just the illegal immigrants that I don't want, without having a certain mindset that says you want to get rid of a group of people. They are still people. And of course that spills over on the more of them we can make illegal, the more of them we can get rid of. But so I mean, it isn't a fundamentally I don't want to say fundamentally violent, but it is a fundamentally destructive concept. It is reducing.
Yes.
It's a reductive. Well, it's not reductive. That's not the right word either. But you see what I mean. In other words, you're trying to get rid of something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. And I think there's a lot of hand wringing, and I understand it. There's a lot of hand wringing over alienating people who might be, generally speaking, moderate in their views, who are, saying, because if you take immigration, you've got the kind of one end of the spectrum, which is just, we should have completely open borders. There should be no limits on where humans are allowed to go. They should be able to roam the planet at will, through to the kind of hardcore, just throw everyone out who, to say, who wasn't born here. But when it comes down to it, this stuff always does end up kind of being rooted in some
physical appearance.
Fairly well, I was going to say fairly illusory concepts around racial identity. Yeah, and of course then you talk about it being reductive, and it does come down to things like appearance, or the way in which people perceive people as being other, because that then becomes the important thing. That otherness becomes the important thing about this, because it ultimately is about exerting power, and the feeling that in order to exert power, you need to be able to exert it over some other group. So I get why there is a kind of caution with that, why politicians may be careful about calling out this party leader, because they don't want to alienate the moderates. But at the same time, I think that your point is the key one, which is that the whole framing of it is, it's about a form of destruction. It's an inherently negative way of looking at things, rather than, thinking about what kind of immigration do we want. The reality is that any politician who's serious about actually governing in the best interest of the country, and who understands the kind of economic and social benefits of migration, in a positive way, that the arguments could be framed around what kind of immigration do we want, what are our important priorities as a society, how do we attract the people who are going to help us do that. The US has been fantastic at doing that. That is why it has been dominant in the tech sector. And the kind of risk with these destructive arguments is that all of that stuff can collapse very quickly. And I don't honestly really understand why there is such timidity about making those arguments, because some of those achievements are so self-evident and are so obviously connected with having a very positive approach to attracting the best and brightest people from around the world, and connecting your economy and your education system with the positive benefits of migration.
I think that there is a certain. Oh, we're way off topic, but what the heck? That's what we do. I do think that there is something in this about American exceptionalism. There is absolutely no doubt, having been raised in the American education system, there is no doubt that there is a pervasive, we're just freaking awesome. And, we are the land of really great individuals, and we are the land of really great freedoms, and we're the land of really great resources, and, we're really great. And I think there is a certain amount of, well, if we're so great, why do we need to bring in a bunch of those foreigners? It feels like you're admitting an inadequacy. And
it does, but some of this does come down to taking on that argument directly and not allowing those values to be co-opted. And when you kind of argue from a positive point of view, like the United States is great, why is it great? It's like, obviously people want to feel that the United States is great, and the reasons for it being great could be connected with those values, those freedoms, the fact that it has, the
you'd think that, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Obviously, the irony here is that a lot of people making those arguments are not Native Americans. I mean, I think it's fair to say almost all of them are not Native Americans, and the kind of the positive arguments to be made there are actually around, well, setting aside what the original settlers did, the positive benefits are around creating a melting pot where you can bring immigrants together. And the same thing is true here. When you look at the arguments that are happening all over, well, England mostly, but also Wales, but not London, where London is a city. This is, I think, why a lot of Republicans in the US seem to hate London and seem to spread lies about London. It's a city where multiculturalism works. It works phenomenally well. And they're driven nuts by the fact that we have a Muslim mayor and that people support him and vote for him. So I think, I agree, but I think that the same sentiments and values that underpin, that can be corrupted into that sense of exceptionalism, are actually sentiments and values that could be harnessed in the positive argument for why, why migration, why acceptance, why inclusion, why all of these things actually are better for everyone. And, to try and kind of bring this back a bit to real humans, I think the same thing is true in Sweden, where generally it is seen as being a kind of very positive, sort of successful, social democratic, accepting country, but it has had a bit of a problem with right wing. There was that terrible shooting a few years ago by someone who was driven by kind of Nazi ideals. I can't remember how many years ago it was, but post Real Humans. But they're clearly picking up within the show on the undercurrent that drove that.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So let's bring it back to something very specific about this in Real Humans. Did you see, because we talked about it last time and you hadn't noticed it, but did you see Kevin was in full-on plaid and suspenders?
Yes.
is that code for something? I mean, I get they're dressing alike. They've picked up their pattern. That much I get. It's code for here's our uniform. But is it something more? Are they supposed to look like lumberjacks or something? I mean, is there some look that they're going
Just look
for that
like
I don't
Canadians.
recognize? Yeah, they look Canadian.
I thought they looked more kind of German, and I don't know whether there's a kind of particular region of Germany where you
Is it the suspenders?
see that
It's the
costume. Yeah, I don't know,
Little leader
and I don't know whether
hosen.
that, and whether there is a kind of tradition of that within Sweden that I'm kind of not aware of. I think I said last time that I thought there was something about it which was the kind of the natural fabrics, the kind of back to nature, connecting it with the kind of survivalist notions, the anti-technology, because obviously anti-Hubot is anti-technology in one sense, but it's connected with all other forms of anti-technology, anti-vaxxing, all of those kind of things. That's what resonated with me from that uniform, but I don't know whether that's because I come at it from a particular point of view as a kind of British viewer that a Swede would see differently, or which you would see differently, watching it in the US.
Yeah. And it was obviously, known because Roger saw it and knew exactly what it was about.
Yes, although he would recognize it if it was a real human's kind of uniform.
Although I didn't notice in the first season when he attended a Real Humans conference that anybody was wearing plaid.
Yeah, that's true. I've
I've
only noticed it through this. Yeah, through the kind of meetings that we've seen recently, and I don't know if it's perfectly possible that it's not kind of connected to any real world cultural manifestations of these ideas. It's just that within the show they want some kind of visual representation, some kind of uniform that expresses these things in the way that, for example, the black shirts in the
Italy,
and Oswald Mosley and all of that kind of stuff between the wars. So it could just be a form of showing people who are part of the movement just, at a glance, and how deep they are into it as well, I think, because, it's not just expressing a sympathy, is it? By the time you actually dress up in a uniform that indicates your political allegiance, you're pretty heavily into it.
Yeah. I suspect we'll come back to that a little bit later on. I'm going to throw out here right now, this is my prediction. It's closer to tomorrow than it is 50 years in the future. Douglas is not going to live to the end of this series, but he is going to live long enough to get married.
I mean, he is going to live long enough to get married. I think we're going to see it. I'm slightly like, can they do something that obvious? Like,
yes,
they're signaling this so strongly.
Oh yeah.
Is it not a sleight of hand?
No, but I'll ask the next question that comes along from that line, because this is Real Humans. So, as I mentioned last time, I thought that they were setting this up for some sort of legal challenge, because once Klaus finds out that she is a Hubot, and his agents, his law firm has already been on the side of trying to get Hubot rights, that this is going to drive some sort of legal drama in the courses. But
no, I've just
carry a step further. She gets married to him, and then he dies. She is now the heir to his stuff, legally or not, or, she's a Hubot. Can she be? Probably not, but they're married. And then there's the next step. Does Douglas have a clone?
I was just coming to the cloning thing because this is where I'm going to stake my bet that actually possibly Douglas is not going to get married to her in his current form, that they are going to encounter legal resistance to him as a human marrying her as a Hubot. And it is going to occur to them that they could solve two problems in one way, which is if he becomes a Hubot, he resolves his mortality issue and he can marry her. So he's going to do what Jonas is doing, in other words.
Okay. All right. It's conceivable. They'll have to figure out a way to make a free. Would that make him a free bot though? That's a
Well, that was what my question was around the difference between what Jonas is doing and what has happened to Leonard, which is, Leonard does not seem to be.
Leonard is the product of a questionnaire. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm still getting more convinced by that. But either way, what we've got here is a kind of diminished version of Leonard. What we understand, although it's fairly shrouded in mystery about Aesher, is that he has developed a way that is essentially could be understood as transferring your soul, if you believe in souls, but is essentially so complete and so sophisticated a copy into a Hubot clone that it is indistinguishable, to other people and to the clone itself, and that is what Jonas is pursuing rather than what's happened to Leonard. And that, because I think there is, that is the theme in this season. It is this kind of transhumanism thing, that is where we're going to see Douglas go as well. The Douglas storyline is maybe another way of exploring the reasons why people might make a choice about what they are. But that's only just popped into my head, and it's a pretty wild idea. So,
and Flash would at least know that A, there can be free Hubots, and B, there is a process that Aesher was working on.
Yes.
So, I mean, she could be the avenue by which he comes to the conclusion that that's a thing that might be possible. Well, one way or the other, he alive is not making it to the end of this season. I'm just
not as a human.
I'm sure of it.
I will.
Let's see. There's a line which I'm paraphrasing from Gordon here. If God created everything and David created us, then David is God. Name the logical fallacy there. I have a bad feeling about that. I really do. I have a bad feeling about that because Gordon has got this God thing in his head, and now suddenly he's reasoned himself into believing that David is God. I don't know where that's going to go, but he's unstable.
Oh, yes. God created the world, but not you. The kind of logic, the God logic is causing some problems there. I'm feeling a little. Well, yes, as it does. I'm feeling a little bit sad. I think that we have this kind of Children of David subroutine that B seems to be.
I hate that
because I didn't particularly like it with Mimi, but now it's something that's got into Gordon's head. You don't know whether what is going on there with the whole, Gordon needs God. Gordon needs to believe in God, and so now Gordon is going to believe that David is God because, he's desperately trying to make facts fit into this need for religion.
Yeah.
But we don't know whether that is just coming in now, whether that is just coming out of that kind of working through those religious concepts and those kind of those tensions and those conflicting needs, or whether that is a result of this stupid Children of David subroutine.
I'm sure I mentioned it last time, or at least if I didn't, I meant to, but I'm going to say it again. You create Hubots, you give the Hubots free will, and then you program in an override so that they don't have free will. I do not like this. I mean, we're not supposed to like David Aesher anyway, I don't think. And I assume that he's the one that did that.
Yeah.
But doggone, that is just that is like such a compromise of what seems to be what you are striving for.
Yeah.
Like that seems to be the thing you would absolutely go, I'm giving you free will. Of course, I'm giving you free will, and then did you eat that apple? Did I tell you not to eat that apple? And then you get all mad about it. So is this the anti-apple that he built into it?
What I'm taking from the kind of the B agenda is that there is this conflict between the ends and the means which she is employing towards those ends, because we spent a lot of the first series kind of essentially establishing how dreadful humans are and how the free Hubots are, in some sense, a new form of life, and with capabilities to feel and believe and develop their own ideas, even if those ideas are about God or about kind of slightly strange ideas about love and marriage or whatever they may be. But the kind of way in which they are protecting themselves / defending against the humans / going and dominating the humans is essentially by overriding all of the kind of Asimov protocols and basically the idea that we're going to achieve world peace by fighting everyone who's against it. It's a bit like the paradox of tolerance.
Yeah, and it's the same writer for series 1 and series 2. I do feel like this thing is a misstep, but yeah.
But while we're on Gordon and God, I loved his question to Aesher. When he's going confessing about Matilda, I beat her with an iron pipe. What does God think about that? Like the challenge to a priest who has just said God can forgive anything is kind of like, yeah, that's fairly extreme. That's quite a test.
But does she think that it's not really a life form? It's interesting that we did get the fact out there that Marilyn told him to do it, that he was following her wishes. Don't know.
Yes, and I think that probably is something that is more subtle about that challenge to the kind of religious doctrines around, the 10 commandments don't allow you to make exceptions, and yet there are situations in which you would say exceptions are justified.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting that he has gone there looking not for forgiveness, but for punishment. Or at least that's the way it came off to me. That he was looking at, so what is the price I have to pay for what I've done? And, there are some branches of religion that follow that kind of mindset.
Very much so, yes.
Yeah. I was sort of surprised and disappointed when Inger turned Leonard back on. And he immediately basically... Do you know who Frosty the Snowman is?
Yes. Do I? I mean, there's a song, Frosty the Snowman. I've heard.
Yes, there's a song, Frosty. Okay. There is a Christmas special, animated, that goes back to I'm sure the 60s. And at least when I was a kid, it aired every year. Just all of these Christmas specials, animated Christmas specials, Charlie Brown Christmas, whatever. Every year. Frosty the Snowman was one of them. And it is basically a short half-hour thing based on the song. about the Christmas spirit and magic and whatnot. And the premise there is that there is this magic hat that the kids put it on a snowman and it comes to life. And when they take it off, he becomes a snowman again, or an inanimate snowman. They put it back on. But every time they put it on, the first thing he does is he just launches back into happy birthday, like it's some sort of pre-programmed. And I couldn't help thinking of that when they reactivated Leonard. Just the instant it happened, I'm like, oh, he's gone into reboot. He is starting from scratch again. And then the fact that he wasn't exactly the same, but it was darn, because he launched much faster into, I'm so proud of you, and I love you, and I'm not good at telling you these things, but I wanted you to know that I'm so proud of you. And I thought that I saw in Inger's reaction that it hit her. Like in that moment, she really got it. This is a recording. This is not her dad. This is just a simulacrum. Is that the right word? It's just, it isn't. It isn't him. It's an echo. And I thought that would be the moment where she'd realize and just turn it back off. And I was very disappointed that she did not turn it back off at that point.
Although you have said how difficult it is going to be for her to turn him off. Like,
but in that moment, I thought she was at the weakest
easy.
moment. Yeah. It's like, ooh, it's not him. The next time Hans turns it off, will she turn it back on? I don't know. But yeah, that was just the thought that came to my mind. It's like, does she just need the message so badly? Is it what she just didn't get from her dad so much when she was younger that getting it now trumps the fact that she knows that it isn't? I mean, okay, let me ask this question. Leonard apparently didn't say he loved her very often. These things happen. Leonard didn't necessarily say that he was proud of her. Again, these are the kinds of things that parents assume that their kids know, and they don't. And it's very common that parents don't say these things to their kids, even if it's true. Did Leonard make this intentionally to manage to make sure that those things got said to her when he could have just, gone and said them to her? Or is this part of the programming that Atsugi does to make it a product that the people will want to have?
Or
does that make sense?
No. I mean, I think that is my assumption, my feeling, that they're kind of programming into it what will make people keep them switched on and hang on to them and not return them in dissatisfaction or take them to the tip or whatever. That it's the kind of giving people what they want thing, not necessarily what they need. And the reason that Inge isn't turning him off is because hearing him say that feels good, even if she knows it isn't real. Even if she knows it isn't good for her, as it were, it's still irresistible.
So then, does that mean that this was not the point of why Leonard made the clone?
Probably. I mean, why do you think Leonard did make clone?
I don't know. I mean, it is so obvious when Inger starts him as, have you got a message for me? It's like, why would I want to carry on in this form if not to pass something on? I can't imagine in my mind saying, yes, I'd like to have a clone of myself so that they'll have somebody around the house who can do the dishes and wash the clothes and, help take care of their chores. Because, of course, that is a valid thing that you might do. It's like, I'm going to take my money and I'm going to give you this incredible, or, they've already got a bunch, but maybe he didn't know it at the time. These chore saving, helpful tools that might be a thing he might want to do for them. But why would he want it to be in the form of himself? That just feels like you would be abusing. Get down and scrub the floor, Grandpa. Okay. It feels.
Yeah, I don't think he would. First of all, I don't think he's bothered about, helping them with their housework, like providing them with help for their housework. I don't think that's the thing. And the reason there is a Hubot in his form is because it's not about them; it's about him. I don't think that he has encoded a message or tried to pass something on. I think that the kind of motivations for it, he may not believe in the way that Jonas does, that it is giving him immortality, but it's still the idea of there being some part of him that will live on after he dies that I think appealed to him, because it's much more about himself than he is about Inga or her family.
I mean, he was when he was alive, he was in a position of being in need of a carer, right? Whether it's Odie or Vera or so he was becoming a burden to Inger's family. Maybe not a huge burden, but he was becoming one. And the next steps along the line are a bigger burden. Trying to look back on, my dad, who also lived on his own and I think was a fair amount older than Leonard, but he was still functional and he didn't require care. He had some health problems, but he was an enormous asset to us. And I hate to call my dad an asset, but he was. We could go somewhere and he could and would feed the dogs. We could go out and he loved to babysit the kids. And he was a wealth of knowledge, of practical knowledge about things that, to this day, I don't, I'm getting there and building up the things, but, I could ask him questions about contracts, or I could ask him what he wouldn't need with Inger, but, just financial things of adulting that you could go to and he had the experience for. So he was an asset and he knew that. I could maybe see him thinking, well, they need a babysitter. Well, there are things that I know that I could pass on that would help them out. There are things I could take care of if they wanted to go out of town for a week or go out of the country for 6 weeks. But we'd done that and could do that because, he lived 2 miles away. And I could see somebody thinking maybe that, but that doesn't appear to be the case with Leonard. Leonard didn't seem to be of value to them. Sorry, guy. But you know what I mean? Apart from just, it's Grandpa.
But I also think
emotional.
He wasn't thinking like that. It's not that one couldn't think in that way, that someone like your father wouldn't have thought in that way. It's that I just don't think he was that he was that aware of what Inga needed or what family wanted or got from him, such as it was, because he was too self-centered.
Yeah, Leonard's definitely not the guy. So it's just weird. I can't figure out his motives, truly. Especially, I don't know. I far more likely would have, just put my memories in Odie. Then we can be Odie Leonard. Anyway. At the Transhumanist Party. Let's start with a question. Why did Einar show the code to Tobe? Or was he showing the code to Mimi?
Yeah, I think it all comes from his interest in Mimi. There's something. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but
Well, I
there's
mean,
something.
think that company that Jonas discovered, Aesher Transhumanism, is bound to be this guy. That's bound to be that same organization.
Right. So, yeah, in which
Maybe
case, because there's something creepy about the way that when he meets Mimi at a party that is supposedly about how he is on the Hubot side, etc. That they should have equal rights to humans and be treated like humans. He says to Mimi, "I would like to look at your settings," and it's like that doesn't feel like it would be a respectful thing to say to a Hubot. It's just like if
Wait,
would you say that to a human?
well, now, all right, let me take a step back. What if Mimi had said to him, "Would you like to take a look at my settings?" In the same way you'd say, "Would you like to come back and see my etchings?"
Yes,
It does have a sort of
exactly. There is something creepy about it.
yeah. So he's got that picture of the family, right? Escher's family, which does not have Mimi in it. But if he's got that picture, he might have other pictures. And if he's got other pictures, it might have Mimi in it. He might recognize her as one of Escher's family robots, which could be why. But I'm not sure why he would show them the code unless he's literally trying to tap on. It's like we're trying to get this code, hoping maybe that Mimi will offer forward and go, "Oh, I've got that code in my head. Here, you're trying to set robots free. Let's do this," not realizing what he's actually doing is he's setting Toby free. And I go, "I've seen that before somewhere." The last time I opened that up and looked at it, it seems like the world went to hell in a handbasket with the virus, but that may not be cause and effect, right? We don't actually know where this virus comes from. I think we're just assuming that, he put it in his computer and that started the whole process, but I don't know for sure. So he doesn't want to call the cops. Fair enough. He doesn't want his Hubots confiscated. We don't know what the penalties are for modding a Hubot, but there must be some, apart from confiscating your Hubot and scrapping it.
I feel like there is something about Einar that isn't quite right, apart from the creepy, let me look at your settings. But I do feel like it is very well established why he doesn't want to call the police, because it comes down to the parallels they're drawing here between the kind of far right organizations, their cover for why for the kind of violent activism that hides behind their ideology, and the unequal way in which they get treated, because the police do come, right?
Yep.
And they arrest the people who were they try to segregate everyone, and they are obviously a threat. The threat to Mimi is clear, and they're not a neutral force in this. They appear to be a neutral force, but they're in a situation where one side is the aggressor and one side. So Inga rocking up after the in the aftermath of all of this, while Hans has gone to bail out the kids, she is the representation of that kind of hand-wringing centrist. And I say this as a centrist, kind of plaintively asking, why does it have to be taking sides? And he just says,
we all get along.
Yeah, exactly. And he just says, what do you call this? And of course, by being violent, the right are forcing the issue here. And so I think that is what they are portraying, which of course the consequence of that is Einar gets shown in a good light. I think the parallels to this in UK politics, and the Tommy Robinson march I mentioned, where there were policemen hospitalized
Mm-hmm.
and about 9 people arrested, has been contrasted to other recent protests. And I shouldn't really say other, because that wasn't a protest. That was an excuse for having a Barney. But where there have been signs that even ambiguously support Palestine action. There was one guy whose sign said plasticine action and police arrest. So there's been loads of these arrests for people who were just holding a sign. And, that's one where I'm not necessarily, well, in fact, I'm not blaming the police, because I think they're in a tricky position here. You don't effectively police a right-wing riot by giving them what they want and going into full-on confrontation and arresting everyone. At the same time, if you are trying to uphold laws that are kind of pretty extreme in what they prohibit, what the hell do you do about people who are going around expressing support for an organisation that has been rather secretively banned as being a terrorist organisation? Who knows whether that's rightly or wrongly? The police are in a difficult position, but the outcome is the same. The instruments of the state, which are supposed to be looking after all of their citizens, are benefiting the agitators, the violent thugs of the right. And that, I think, is what is happening here. I don't necessarily feel like Einar is going to be vindicated in the long run, but in this situation, I think he is entirely justified in the position he takes.
I mean, I think that we have been explicitly told, but I'm not, now I'm thinking about it, I'm not 100% sure that when we first met Einar, my thought was that Betty called him her brother. But I'm not 100% sure now. It is where she lives. It is where he lives. I'm not thinking that they're a couple. But I am kind of, if he is indeed who Aesher assets, the Aesher transhumanism, if that's him, if he's the head of that, I'm now almost wondering if we aren't going to have a surprise. There are more children of David out there. And maybe Einar is one of them.
Oh, interesting.
Because I can see that would be the only person that David Aesher would trust, would be somebody he programmed, because clearly he doesn't trust them with free will.
Do you think Einar knows? If that is the case, do you think he knows?
Maybe.
Does he know what he is?
Maybe. Probably. Well, yeah, I think he'd have to. Got to charge up.
Yeah,
he'd know.
I guess so.
But
I suppose I'm starting to think of the parallels with the Battlestar Galactica read. And that was always the kind of end of season climatic reveal was, suddenly a whole bunch of other characters are Cylons. And this show, I was complaining about the fact they're not introducing new characters, but here he is. Here is a new character, and that is exactly the kind of thing that could be the reason for introducing someone who is unfamiliar to us.
Why didn't Bea kill Jonas? I mean, everyone else that she's come across, she just grabs the nearest pair of scissors, and she's ready to slice him up. But Jonas, she just knocks unconscious. Considering what he said to her when he was trying to convince her to talk to him, he sounds like more of a threat to her than anybody else. I mean, obviously plot reasons, but
I don't understand why Bea does the things that he does. Like, I don't understand why she kills Greta. Doesn't seem to be necessary.
Yeah, unless she wants to use Greta's house as a base of operations.
Which she doesn't, though. Or would she have done if Jonas hadn't turned up? I don't know.
I think if Jonas hadn't turned up, maybe she was. They don't mind the flies and the smell. So, she's done it before. Also, let's face it, that house is probably filled with stuff that might be useful to her, like, I don't know, the probate list.
In which case, she kills people who it's necessary for her to kill. So, Is it necessary for her to kill Jonas?
Could be. Well, that's awfully nice of her. The killer Hubot that she is.
I mean, it would be nice if there was some nuance to that. I feel like B was an interesting character in the first series, and I don't now. The B storyline goes on. She's still in it, but it's not really very interesting, I'm afraid.
And she was going to kill Asa, and she didn't need to kill Asa, but she was going to do it anyway. So,
and I feel, I mean, it's maybe coloured by the fact that she's the one going around child of Daviding people, but then you've got that situation where after Gordon has been child of Davided, and yet when B is going to kill Asa, he still says don't kill her. So what does this override actually do? It all feels a bit.
I don't think that this override is as all pervasive as it probably should be, because I think we were seeing Mimi free of influence when she reached around to kiss Tobe. And then there is that
that was another example.
Head jerk noise, and then we are the children of David, get out kind of thing. So I think it's some sort of routine that's running, and at some point it locks you down if you go too far over the line. So,
but is there some kind of nice, rational, understandable explanation for why it's like this, or is it just
no?
Is it just going to be confused all the way through this because they're not willing to go one way or the other? I mean, it's kind of boring.
The Hubots are not interesting. That's right. They're not interesting if they don't have free will.
Exactly.
That is the whole point of the show. Take it away. And so they've got to struggle with it. They have to struggle against this counter programming.
Yeah.
They have to overcome their own deficiencies, if you will. So, so it's not going to make any sense because that's not how it would work if you'd program that in. But yeah. Roger lays down the law for Kevin. We're done with this. You're not hanging out with those people anymore. So Kevin's out of the show. He's not gonna hang out with them anymore, right?
Yeah, of course he's definitely going to do.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I don't know if you took the time to do this. I did, so I'll pass it on to the audience who did not, because the subtitles I have for Real Humans do not subtitle newspaper headlines or newspaper articles. So I'll point out a couple things here. The articles that Jonas were looking at, the headlines included Hubot inventor found dead in flames. So in case there was any doubt, Aesher is the inventor of the Hubots, not just a guy who was like really good with it.
I tried to get my phone to translate it for me. Couldn't.
It doesn't do Swedish.
It couldn't deal with Swedish. It was very annoying.
That's right.
Like,
Apple Translate can't do that. Google Translate will.
Well, I was like, can I be bothered to get up and go to the computer and find something that will do this? Or shall I just try and, base my understanding of it on there are a few English words in amongst the.
I almost sent you the pictures of them, but So the picture of the house, here the Hubot inventor burns to death in his home. There's one called The Transhuman Moment, and then following up with, he saw the potential first of all. And there's a thing, the Hubot, how David Aesher created it. And it says, from the first prototype, David Escher's goal was clear. And there is a picture of the first prototype, and it is the one in the safe. Which, I'd put the prototype, if I was the inventor of it, I'd put the prototype somewhere because that's worth buku bucks someday at a Christie's auction.
Yeah.
If nothing else, that's worth money. But I think that's where his brain is. I still think that brain is in there.
Yeah. I think that the events of this episode definitely increase the likelihood of you being right about that.
The pioneer in headwinds, David Escher's life was marked by personal tragedies, and they talk about everybody dying. and he lived as a hermit, basically. The line that triggers Jonas off is David is mourned by his mother, Greta Aesher. That one's pretty easy. And just looking down through the article, it's not exactly gibberish, but it is kind of funny that they do mention that he started this whole thing based on open source software, various open source software operating systems, although they don't necessarily name them. But
I did see the words open source in English.
Yeah, he didn't. Apparently, he's not. They're not running Windows. They're apparently running Linux, which also explains a lot. Or Linux, depending on which you're pronouncing. Linux, Linux, GIF. It's all good here.
Well, I think if the guy's Torvalds, I don't know if I've pronounced that right, but I feel like it's got to be Linux in that.
Does he call it that? I mean, the inventor of the GIF calls it GIF, but there are still people who refuse.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, but is it named after him?
No, it is not. He named it. It's graphic interchange format.
Is he called Mr. GIF?
Yeah.
Well, if he was called Jeff, you can't go. Everyone should call him Geff. Geff, the inventor of the GIF.
But he named it. He calls it GIF. It's GIF. I mean, I'm going with that. And if I ever hear definitively from Linux or Linux from Torvalds, I'm going to call him Torvalds just in case his name is Linus as opposed to Linus. I'll try to take that on board, but in deference to the guy who named it.
I mean, it is slightly unreasonable to expect GIFs to be called GIFs because you have to know what they stand for to know that the G is from graphics, and that's the reason it's a hard G, because all the rules of English say if you spelt a word GIF, it would be GIF.
Yeah. So, let's see. And the only other thing is, in my notes, Matilda's jealousy. I mean, I can kind of see how the kids might be feeling a little, mom is giving a whole lot of attention to Mimi here and not to us. So I can kind of see that. But I think it's interesting that there is that line where she says to Matilda, Mimi will never be human. You are a human. And it is, Mimi, of course, hears that. What, is that a thing that makes her go sad in the heart, in her little mechanical heart? It's like, oh, I'll never actually be a real human. Because is that what prompts her to kiss Tobey? Because we have had the scene with Flash. I'm still going to call her Flash. I don't care if they call her Florence. I'm going to call her Flash because it's Flash and frickin' Gordon. And we had that scene where she reminds Mimi that she loved Leo. And that she is trying to live her life because she loves Douglas. And she's tying that to being human.
Yeah.
So Mimi's going off, well, okay, Tobey's here. And then the Children of David thing kicks in and knocks her back in that moment.
I think that this aspect of the storyline is generally handled pretty well. Like the way in which Matilda plays this out doesn't make her seem like a whiny, unsympathetic teenager. She has these feelings. They end up talking about them. It feels like it is addressed in quite a kind of mature and adult way. But the bit of the storyline I don't like is that the way in which Mimi overhears that, and the way in which we're obviously now thinking that's going to make her feel like she's going to be, it's going to alienate her from Inga after Inga has shown her the kind of respect that she has by taking her to work and by essentially treating her in the way in the way that Matilda has found so difficult, but as a kind of almost as a child, as she would treat her children. So the thing that annoys me is how wrong Inga gets it, really. She says, Mimi will never be human like you are human. And she's trying to reassure Mathilde, but she doesn't do it in the way that she should. I mean, the correct answer is to Mathilde is that you, Mathilde, are perfect, not that Mimi is in some way imperfect. It's like that's what Mathilde is looking for. She's looking for reassurance about her. She's not looking to be better. And this is the problem with all of the kind of the fascists in this, is they only understand their superiority in terms of beating other people down. And the contrast in this is Toby, because he gets it absolutely right. And so when Mimi asks why he feels the way he feels about her, he replies, because you're you. You know, that's the sentiment Inga should have given to Mathilde, that who she is why she loves her, and that's enough. And she doesn't have to compete with Mimi.
There is this sort of, you've added a new baby to the family.
And which is always difficult.
Which I think Matilda's the oldest.
Yeah.
So she's been through this before, twice.
How well she remembers it, I don't. Oh yes, twice. Yes, yeah.
So, the fact that instead of pointing out Mimi's lack of humanity, just, there are other people in this family, and I love them all. And Mimi's the newest, and she is finding her way, and I am helping her, whereas you are much further down that road.
Yeah, absolutely.
I afford you a certain amount of autonomy, basically, that I'm still sort of parenting Mimi. I don't know that I have anything else on this episode.
I think the only other thing on my notes is whether I think it's to Mimi at the party. Mathilde says something like, "Can you download a program so you can speak Russian or fly a helicopter?" Is that a Matrix reference?
Might be.
Why was it those things? Why is she expecting a Hubot to be able to fly a helicopter, or indeed speak Russian?
That wouldn't surprise me. The Matrix gets a lot of. I'm not recalling that particular thing out of any of the Matrix stuff, but I'm guessing it was there.
I haven't had time to rewatch The Matrix since watching this episode, although it doesn't much to prompt me to rewatch The Matrix. But I don't know. I thought it might have been.
It certainly wouldn't surprise me. I mean, why not? These are kids. It's pop culture. Sure, I would. I appreciate. How do I put this? There's a tendency in science fiction programs to ignore the fact that there are science fiction programs in the world. Does that make sense? That they don't.
Yeah.
They aren't self-referential to other TV shows or movies. And I think that's a mistake. I admit.
You can see why, because it's going to alienate the audience. I mean, it does happen.
Okay. I'm gonna throw the one last thing there about that specific thing. It did alienate me once. I was watching at the theater. I was watching E.T. and when it first came out, and I was not. It's like I'm not like a huge E.T. fan. It was an okay film. It's not a patch on like Jurassic Park or anything like that. But I was watching, it's like, it's okay. And then they get to that scene towards the very end of the film, and they're like, we got to get him to this spaceship. And one of the other kids, well, can't they just beam him up? And I walked out. I just was not enjoying the film enough to care. And at that point, it wasn't that line. It was, come on, this is reality, man. That was the part. It's like
Oh,
that was the finger went up, and I walked out of the theater, and I was like, I'll just meet you out in the lobby. And I went out and got food and went to the bathroom or whatever. And I never saw the end of E.T. I mean, I have subsequently seen it on like TV where it's shown up and like, oh, okay, yeah, they came back and got him. Big shock. I knew that's where it was going at that point, so it didn't really matter. But so yes, I guess it can alienate you, but at the same time, it's kind of hard, to be in a world where like somebody goes to the future, let's say, and they're showing them all this stuff that they have on Star Trek. And the person looking at it is like, this is just amazing. It's like, it is amazing, but at the same time, you kind of should have been prompted because you knew about transporters and spaceships and warp drive and self-sealing suture devices and all of those things. And so it does kind of put those people as being like, how did you grow up without ever being introduced to the concept of, if you don't want to call it a transporter, a transmat, or any of those things? Is like, how did you grow up and not at least be exposed to those things?
and yet,
So
amazingly, there are people who don't watch sci-fi.
There are, but even those people get some of the cultural backwash from those things.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and so yeah, something like Star Trek is hugely. It pervades all sorts of pop culture, and I'm sure that is widely recognised. But I think the thing about being very explicit about these things is that you risk the kind of alienation, and you see this. I mean, I guess one thing is the more, and I'm sure we've actually literally discussed the Doctor Who episode, The Christmas Invasion, where the Doctor talks about knowing Arthur Dent, and that's a very direct reference to another prominent sci-fi work without it being obvious whether he's actually referring to it as a piece of fiction or within the fictional world. And here, the ambiguity is just, there is no direct reference to the Matrix. It's if I'm right about this, if it is picking up on the Matrix, it's a nod to people who are familiar with the Matrix. It's not so much alienation as a kind of meta textual note to people who are watching and enjoying this show, who like the kind of ideas, because the ideas are similar, aren't they? They're talking about what it means to be human versus what it means to be a machine, and all of those kind of concepts. It's a slightly different take on it, but it's what underpins the mate. And in fact, even because we've talked about shows that do similar things to what Real Humans is doing, we've mentioned already in this episode Battlestar Galactica, and there are obviously parallels to things like Blade Runner and to Dollhouse and Westworld, which has kind of similarities to Dollhouse, and I would argue this, because you're talking about androids and autonomy and free will. The TV series of that then kind of went on. By the time it got, I can't remember if it was the second or the third series, and it was kind of running out of ideas to explore around that, really got into basically ripping off ideas from the Matrix. So I think these things they're not just sci-fi, they're sci-fi works that are exploring very, very close related.
Yeah. I would think that it would not be the place for them to be mentioning, say, Westworld.
Yeah,
Perhaps.
well, yes,
that might be the line you want to draw there, is to not.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because and the fact that, I mean, this has nothing to do with sci-fi, but in one of my favorite films, which is Out of Sight, the Clooney and Lopez characters both like Faye Dunaway films, and they reference 3 films. I think it's I think probably Bonnie and Clyde and 3 Days of the Condor. What? There's one other. Anyway, the point about it is it's this kind of it's this film about, it's this cat and mouse story with someone who's a criminal and someone who is an officer of the law getting very, very close, talking about Faye Dunaway films, and they don't mention the Thomas Crown affair. And it's like, yeah, but I understand why, because it's, yeah, you don't mention the Westworld. Well, you don't mention Westworld in Real Humans because it is just too close.
Network was the third film.
Yes, I'm mad as hell, and yeah.
I'm gonna give you a couple, just because we were on the topic of metatextually mentioning things out of thing. I'm just going to give you a couple that have happened recently, and these are inconsequential. Therefore, they are not going to be spoilery in any way, shape, or form. They are there just to poke the bear, as it were, in 2 different episodes of Star Trek Strange New Worlds this past season. In one of them, there was a TARDIS, the TARDIS.
Yes.
And in the other one, a very long-lived character on the show said something like, "Remind me to tell you about the time when I traveled with a time-traveling doctor," and then got cut off before that went any further.
So she probably knows Arthur Dent too.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what made me think of it. If the Doctor Who can mention Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and now Star Trek is referencing Doctor Who, it's just a matter of time before the next version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is, Star Trek. Anyway. All right. I think we have definitely waffled on long enough for this particular episode, unless there is anything else.
No, I've definitely run out of waffle.
It is so disappointing to me that the episodes don't have titles, because it is so anticlimactic for me to say, well, when we look at the Real Humans again next time, it'll be episode 5. It's like, hey, it needs a name. It needs to give you something to hook onto and think, ooh, that sounds interesting. But no, it's episode 5. Simon, thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure, as always.
And listeners, I hope you'll join us all again next time on Fusion Patrol.
This has been Fusion Patrol. Thanks for listening. If you're enjoying this podcast, we hope you'll consider supporting us at buymeacoffee.com/fusionpatrol or patreon.com/fusionpatrol. For our Patreon subscribers, we're currently running a special series on Babylon 5. Come join the conversation and find other content at fusionpatrol.com. You can contact us on social media, where our Fediverse address is @podcast@fusionpatrol.com or by email at feedback@fusionpatrol.com. Fight the Future by Amberwolf is our theme music. You can find more from Amberwolf at bandcamp.com. This has been a Lone Locust production.